It was supposed to be a season-saving trip to Dubai, but it's turned into a season-ending trip for Kai Havertz. If reports are to be believed, he'll be out for the rest of the season. He's been criticised a lot recently, but he's still Arsenal's top scorer by far this season, 15 goals in all comps. So, first of all, just how big a blow is this for Arsenal?
I mean, it's just a massive blow. There's no other way of dressing it up, really. Like you said, he's top scorer. For all the criticism, he has scored goals, 15, in about 32, 33 games. It's not a bad strike rate for any striker. And it's not just that, it's what he brings to the team. It's his work rate, it's his work ethic, it's how he holds the ball up, playing that central striking role that no one else can do. And to lose him without any sort of backup option, it's impossible to dress it up anyway, other way than just being an absolute hammer blow to Arsenal's hopes for the remainder of the season. It was crushing news when David Ornstein reported it. The news just sort of filtered out the day before. There'd been a few videos doing the rounds, or certainly one video doing the rounds from a fan in Dubai who was watching the training session, and the video emerged of Havertz sort of limping off the pitch with the medical staff and really, really struggling to walk, which didn't look great at all. When you kind of think of Martinelli, when he got his injury, obviously at Newcastle, he was able to walk off the pitch pretty well, and even that was a month out. But seeing Havertz barely be able to put any sort of weight on his leg, it didn't look great. And then obviously David, breaking the news that everyone feared that it was going to be a season ender. It's just, yeah, it's a hammer blow. Arsenal, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about this in a minute, but the gamble that they took in the transfer window is quite remarkable just how quickly it has been exposed. It's the absolute worst case scenario for Arsenal.
Yeah, that brings me on to my next question. It's just about they took that massive gamble, as we've said in January, and it's fair to say now the gamble has backfired in the most spectacular way possible, hasn't it?
It has, yeah, absolutely. Mikel was asked about it in the press conference immediately after the transfer window closed, and he said, "Look, it's not a gamble; it's a reality." But it was a gamble. It was absolutely. We could all see it was a gamble. Arsenal were light anyway going into the window. They got even lighter with the departure of for the season of Gabriel Jesus with the injury, and they simply had to add to their squad. They had to give Arteta more attacking options. He spent every single press conference calling for it. Players called for it during January as well, and for them not to do anything, it was just I'm not even sure gamble's the right word almost. It was just such a bizarre decision and to go with what you've got when what you had was clearly not enough. And now, the fact that since the window shut, they've lost Martinelli and now they've lost Havertz for the season, it couldn't have backfired, as you said, any more spectacularly than it has. And yeah, I mean, you're basically left with three forwards now. One of them is a 17-year-old who you need to try and manage their minutes and protect their body because it's still growing, and the other one's Raheem Sterling, who as good as he's been as a Premier League player, let's face it, has not performed to any sort of level at Arsenal to suggest that he's going to have any sort of impact. So yeah, it's just very, very tough to see a ray of light from Arsenal from this news. It's that crushing.
Yeah, with that January transfer risk or gamble or whatever you want to call it, it seemed like Arsenal were prioritizing the summer, not wanting to do anything in January that could jeopardize any big money moves there. But so, can you see it maybe from the board's point of view that they didn't want to, like I say, do anything to jeopardize the summer, and also they didn't think it would backfire this horribly. Two injuries to two key attackers, literally 2 weeks after the windows ended. There's all this talk about Arsenal taking a risk, will it pay off? It seems like the injury gods have been conspiring against them. So, can you cut them some slack, or should they have planned for this situation to happen because Arteta's basically been forced to use the same forwards every week?
Yeah, no, I think you have to plan for it. You have to protect yourselves. This is a yes, it's a football, but it's a business, and in any walk of life in business, you have to think of the worst case scenarios and protect yourselves against those worst case scenarios. And the worst case scenarios for Arsenal were so obvious because they were so light already in that department. I get the whole waiting for the summer, and I've spoken about it before, and I get that, but you cannot tell me there wasn't someone in European or world football who could have come in January, even if it was just a loan, just allowed you the opportunity to, at times in games, take Kai Havertz off with half an hour to go, or take someone else off with half an hour to go. I know that all the arguments are we don't just want a body in, but it's almost got to that stage where it is just a fact of you do need a body in who you can throw in for half an hour, who still needs to do a job, let's face it, and it still needs to be a quality player, but can allow you to rest some players because you're going to have to play these players 90 minutes every single game between now and the end of the season. So they had to protect themselves from that. And you look at some of the players who did move in January. Can't tell me none of those could have helped Arsenal, and you can't tell me they couldn't have convinced one of those to move. Kolo Muani. I always felt going into January he was a player everyone knew was available, and Juventus are a huge club. Don't get me wrong, but I struggle to believe that if Arsenal got themselves in a good position with Moani and prepared themselves, they couldn't have said, just come here in the Premier League for half a season and play. And who knows, if you really, really impress, you could earn yourself a permanent move. He's a quality player, Moani. Still fits the profile of the type of player Arsenal like to sign. Didn't quite happen for him in PSG, but he's shown he is still a good player. He's showing it in Italy already. You can't tell me that they couldn't have got involved in that. And he would have made an impact for Arsenal. So there were players available. You just look at Aston Villa, for example, in their game the other day against Spurs, who they brought off the bench, Asensio and Rashford. I know Rashford was very unlikely because of the loan rules prevented it in England, and Arsenal wouldn't have really bought him. So that one was probably out the window. But even someone like Asensio, there were players there who were gettable that were on loan that wouldn't have stopped you doing your summer business. So I don't really buy that argument totally. I see it if I'm not saying go and spend 70 million on a striker you don't really want, but there had to be players out there who could have helped in some way that where you didn't have to go and spend 67 million and ruin your summer plans.
Yeah, I think you like I said, especially with Kolo Muani, he's had a really fast start to life in Serie A. That's, a bit more painful for Arsenal fans. Also, touching on that, there was the whole Matty's Tell saga on deadline day. Seemed like when Man United dropped out, Arsenal looked to be at the head of the queue, but they decided against it. Tottenham swooped in. There was that crazy deadline day saga. So were you surprised that Arsenal didn't go all out for Matty's Tell?
Not really, because the kind of word I was getting was that that wasn't really something they were exploring. I know they were constantly being linked with it, but I don't think there was anything, I think there was conversations that were had, but I don't think it ever went any further than that. And so I wasn't overly surprised they didn't even get involved in it because I was kind of being told that they weren't going to be getting involved in it. But again, he scored against Aston Villa. It was a nice finish. Could he have, that's a loan deal. There didn't need to be a buy option included in it. I know Tottenham eventually did get one included in that deal, but initially it wasn't going to be included. So that doesn't stop you doing summer business. And it is again, it's someone who has made a difference for Bayern Munich in some of the minutes that he's played, certainly last season, who could have come in and made an impact, could have helped. So there were players there to be got, and that's what I keep falling back on. And I get the argument about the summer plans and not disrupting them, but needs must, and needs really did must for Arsenal in that January. It was so obvious, and I know you like going back to your question about the owners. You can't predict what was going to happen, but I think we could all have predicted what was going to happen because of the way the season has gone for Arsenal. And like you said, the injury gods have been against Arsenal since the start of the season. I think you almost could, especially as these players were going to have to play so much football and have been playing so much football because there's been injuries. And now look at them. Two of them have done their hamstrings since the window shut, and that's not really coincidence. I don't think. I think that has to be down to the sheer amount of minutes that they've played and been forced to play. I mean, I was at Wolves. I was in the press box at Wolves at the end of that game, and Kai Havertz collapsed to the floor for the final couple of minutes, couldn't move, got up holding his hamstring. Coaching staff were helping him get off the pitch. You know, if that's not a danger sign, I don't know what is. And a warning sign of what could be to come, I don't know what is. And still they chose not to do anything.
Yeah, I reckon that Wolves game that should have been the spark or the trigger for the transfer team to think, okay, no, at some point he's going to pick up something serious. We need to get something done. And in terms of unless Arsenal move for a free agent, which we'll go into in a second, the only internal solutions right now, like I say, those three right now, Nwaneri, Sterling, Trossard. I think Trossard's the most natural fit for that centre forward role. Sorry. There have been a couple of wild card solutions posed. I've seen one about Mikel Merino playing up front, Kieran Tierney left wing, and there's also Butler Oyedeji made his debut against Dinamo Zagreb. So, could you see Arteta doing anything outlandish up front, or are we just going to see Nwaneri, Trossard, Sterling until Saka or Gabby are back?
I think we'll certainly see that'll be the front three against Leicester on Saturday, providing there's no other injuries that have been picked up since then. I think that'll be the front three. But Mikel said it the other day in a press conference that at some point they're going to have to try something new. So, and they are, during game they can't play 90 minutes every single game. So, even if you're starting with that, you've got to finish the game slightly differently because you're going to have to take some of those players off. I've seen some of the wildcard suggestions, like I'll stick Calafiori up front. He scored two really good goals. He can play there, or Gabriel. He's such a threat in the box. That all sounds well and good, but in reality, if you do that, it will look very, very quickly. It will look very obvious that you've got a centre back playing up front. I don't see that as a viable option. Marino maybe in game again when I go back to the sort of for the last 25 minutes or something like that. I don't really see it as an option as from the start. Yes, he's not bad at arriving in the box late and scoring goals, but when you're playing as a striker, you're not going to be arriving in the box late and scoring goals because you're already going to be in the box, or you should be anyway. So that's going to sort of take away that threat that he has. It's a very different game, being the number nine in the central striker than it is being a midfielder who arrives late and tries to get to the back post for balls in. So I think it has to be Trossard as the nine, and then Nwaneri and Sterling around him. To be honest, I think they really should be thinking about a formation change as well. I think that could be very useful with what's left for Arsenal. I do look at sort of a 5-3-2 type thing. With you can have Calafiori, Saliba, and Gabriel as the centre backs. You've got the wing back options in Tierney, or as Ben White's coming back. He can play there. Timber can play there. You've got options there in Lewis Skelly, obviously on the left side as well. Then you can play. You can have Rice and Partey holding. You can have Odegaard almost playing as a 10 behind then two forwards, Trossard and a Nwaneri, and then at least you've got a forward option on the bench then. You're not starting with all three of them. At first I was a bit against it because it's like that'll be so disruptive. They're so used to the 4-3-3 and that'll be really disruptive in season. But now that Havertz has gone, I'm just looking at it and thinking it's really quite an appealing option that could work. He's going to have to think outside the box now. Absolutely has to. I don't think he can just do tried and tested 4-3-3 every single game for 90 minutes. I think there's going to have to be changes to accommodate allowing players a game off or starting on the bench and things like that. And I do look at that option of a change of formation as being quite an appealing one.